Michael Joseph, welcome to Data Talks. Those of you listening in, Michael Joseph is the legendary CEO of Safaricom, was also recently chairman of Kenya Airways, and had what you could say led the digital transformation in Kenya and beyond for a long time. And now he's connecting from Wales, but I know, Michael, also you're quite often in Kenya. Welcome to the show.
Thanks. Thank you, Wolfgang. Good to meet you. See you again, actually. Thank you. Sorry for the delay in getting this moving, but thank you.
It's all great, and you still owe me a trip to Vienna, and we hope to meet you in Kenya anyway soon.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But Michael, we have a number of senior executives on this show, and the way we'll start is always to understand a bit more the person behind. And here, just as context, once I brought you to the World Bank, you said, why was Safaricom so successful? Why were you a successful CEO? And then you said, somewhere in short, you've thought it was your last job, and it didn't matter if you screwed up anyway. So that was a little bit what I remember. So but tell us a bit how what happened before the Safaricom period and what happened during Safaricom.
Well, Safaricom, actually, I came to Kenya in 2000 to start Safaricom, and it was not, it basically, everybody expected this to be a rather small company, maybe to 500,000 customers, maybe in the end, a very difficult country, very corrupt country, and basically sent me there actually to fail. And so I came to Kenya, and before you came, I think, and there's very little data available, very little information that you could use to design your products and things like that. So most of what we did was on gut feel and instinct. And fortunately, now in hindsight, of course, very much in hindsight, all the decisions that we made were the right decisions to grow this company. So we focused on the people at the base of the economic pyramid. You remember this very wonderful saying when I came to the World Bank one time about people at the base of the economic pyramid. And we focused on that, and we struck it lucky. We did the right things at the right time. And very soon, we became a very big company, and one of the most successful companies in East Africa, a multi-billion company. We started at the total capital of Safaricom when we started, which is what the major shareholder put in, which was Vodafone at the time. The total capital was $20 million. And today, the company is probably worth $2.5 billion. $2.5 billion. So it's a phenomenal success. But I think the important thing, in my view, is why, how did we become so successful so fast? I think is what we did is we tried to understand the market. Who were we selling our services to? We were not selling our services to people at the top of the economic pyramid, not to the middle of the economic pyramid. We sold our service. We deliberately targeted people at the base of the economic pyramid, not the bottom of the economic pyramid, but the second or third level up from there. People who basically came to work in public transport. That's our target market, and I think that was the fundamental thing that sort of created our success, is focusing on that. So all the products that we created, all the things we did, the customer service, how we designed customer service, being free 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, whereas our competitor was only open 5 days a week. We had started off with prepaid rather than postpaid, so people could easily walk into a Safaricom shop and buy a line and walk out. We focused at low-cost mobile phones. All of those things contributed to the success of Safaricom because we targeted people at the base of the economic pyramid.
Well, thanks for that, Michael. And that very much resonates for how we trying to structure and project data at World Data Lab. And when I founded World Data Lab, it was highly influenced by Kenya and the experience there and the demography. You just said something interesting, which I didn't know when you said they would send you to fail to Kenya. Tell us a bit that context, but also Kenya became a big part of your life now. So just
exactly.
Tell us about why did they send you, and tell us about Kenya.
Well, before I came to Kenya, I was the CTO in Hungary, just next door to you there. And I was the CTO. I built the third mobile operator in Hungary. And I really wanted to stay in Hungary. I loved Hungary. I loved everything about Hungary. I really wanted to stay there, and I wanted to become the CEO of that company. But basically what they said to me, my bosses at the time said to me, look, your personality, you're not really, you don't have the personality of a European CEO, with all the finesse and political awareness, very diplomatic. Why did you go to? I managed to see this that Kenya was coming up in the Vodafone group, and I said, "Can I go there?" And they said, "Well, it's probably not going to work. There's so much corruption. The interconnect, the government won't pay. The telecom won't pay. You know, yeah, go there. I think that's what they said. Let him go to Africa. Figure it out, and perhaps he'll fail." So that was the actual, where it started from. So I was not, and I think I was fortunate in that way, in that because Kenya was regarded as somewhat unsafe country, uh, very corrupt. None of the senior executives in Vodafone had much hope for Kenya, and so I think that's one of the reasons that no one told me or came to tell me what to do. So you could do what you wanted to do. Of course, I could have failed, and then I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you. It's very much the same with M-Pesa. When later on, when we launched M-Pesa, it was everybody said to me, from the senior people, this is a waste of time. This is a waste of money. Don't bother with this thing. But in the end, it worked. And if I'd listened to everybody else, we would not be here. So.
So
But of
how
course, yeah.
how did you get attached then to Kenya? Because now it's 25 years and you're still spending a lot of your time there.
I think everybody who comes to Kenya and spends more than 3 years in Kenya, you either love it or you hate it. And I fortunately I loved it, and I stayed on. My contract was extended 3 times. I continued to do, when mobile money came along, I worked on mobile money, and then the president asked me to take on the role of chairman of Kenya Airways, thinking I could do the same magic with Kenya Airways as I did with Safaricom. Didn't always work. And I think that's how I stayed, because I fell in love with the country, and I'm still there. And my home, actually, now I'm a Kenyan citizen. I'm still in Kenya. I have a home there. In fact, I'll be there in 2 weeks' time. Kenya is a country I regard as my home now.
Congratulations on the citizenship, also, Michael. Let's shift to the next theme, which again, I have a background story, and I think it may have been the first time we met personally. I remember it was on a Saturday in 2009. We had the World Bank chief economist Justin Lin visiting. And again, in your direct, sometimes non-diplomatic, but very interesting way, we had this roundtable, and you, I think a few other executives and government ministers, now secretaries, were there. And then I moderated that. And at the end, you may remember, we then said, what's the next frontier, Michael? Or what's the next frontier? I think I said that. And then somebody was joking, yeah, maybe you want to have 95% market share. And then you responded and says, no, the next frontier is data. And again, this is 16 years ago. And people were almost like scratching their heads and said, what is this guy talking about? Data, how can this be a business? I'm not sure if you had in mind data industry that's there now, or if it's just voice versus data. But tell us what you meant at that time and how it shaped then basically also what we do now.
Look, I think, this is influenced by, when we launched Safaricom, as you know, it was, the data was at the most GPRS, which was hardly anything. And I remember that the people really enjoyed it, and because there was no other means, internet cafes were very far and few between, but you could see that there was a hunger for people to do more, to learn more. We were very fortunate in Kenya, is that Kenyans are very entrepreneurial, and so they wanted to see what they could do. And I think, every time the new license came out, I remember with the 3G license came out, the regulator wanted $20 million for this 3-year license, for the 3G license. Sorry, I was there the next morning with a check, and my competitor said, "Oh, why would you need 3G? Nobody wants 3G. The handsets are too expensive. Whatever." I said, "No, this is what is required. This is what's going to be big." And even today, you still see today people saying, "Oh, 5G. Do you really need 5G?" I think data is the key, and that gives you people the power to do what they want to do. And I remember this comment. I remember that meeting quite vividly, actually. Yeah. Because actually, I said to my bosses I wanted 95% market share, and they said, no, you can't go be more than 80%. Otherwise, the government will declare you too dominant.
And coming back to the beginning, what you said, that it was a lot by gut feeling and no data on the bottom or the base of the pyramid, as you say, and of the middle class, which we monitor now. And how do you see now data and analytics in Safaricom, but also how you used it in Kenya Airways, and how is that new industry emerging in your view, especially in Africa?
I think this is key for our growth. If you look at any industry that we're in, I mean, it doesn't matter if it's the airline industry or the telecoms industry or the banking industry. Data is so key for our continued growth. If you want to be in, just stay where you are in steady state, data may be important, but not critical. But if you want to grow and you want to also be very competitive, you need data and you need the refinement of data. I just look at, you look at, or let's look at, not to malign anybody, let's look at the mobile industry in Europe. The mobile industry in Europe is completely flat. Okay, people are struggling. They're struggling to make money. They're struggling to get margin. Why is it? Because it's a utility now. It's like power. Everybody needs electricity. You buy electricity. You don't care where you buy it from. It doesn't matter who it is. I've said this many times. If you put all the mobile operators' different shops side by side, and you take their color away, their brand away, you would not know the difference between these companies. So data is the one where you can use data, the refinement of data, to actually grow. I'll just give you one example, Wolfgang, which is very close to my heart. If you look in Kenya today, and the big business in Kenya today is financial inclusion, and mostly microcredit. That's the big thing today. Microcredit is big. There's maybe 120 companies in Kenya lending money, giving mobile credit at an instant. And what is the end result? End result is they're charging so much money for that, for lending money, either in upfront fees or in interest, that there's a heavy bad debt situation in Kenya today. Okay, so and why do they do that? They charge a lot of money because they don't know their customer well enough. So therefore they have to cover their bad debt. In fact, if you look at some of the institutions in Kenya, bad debt is about 60 to 70%. I mean, it's massive. But my feeling is if you know your customer using big data analysis, you can lend money with a much more confidence of the security risk that you enter. Your bad debt could come down to less than 10% easily, in my opinion, if you really analyze your customer. And I take a company like Safaricom. Safaricom knows everything about you, every single thing about you. And if they analyzed it, they could determine with a 95% accuracy what your credit score would be, with 95, maybe even 98% accuracy. Why? Because they know everything about you. I mean, I could tell you if I got your data, if you were my customer, I could even tell you which football teams you follow. I could tell you what your hobbies are. I could tell everything without asking you. Just by I'm talking to the choir here. Just by looking at the way you use your life, who you follow on the internet or Facebook or Instagram or whatever, and I could put together this picture of you. And that's why I think going forward into the next 10 years, big data analysis is going to be critical for growth. Okay, when I say growth, if you want to be steady state, don't worry too much. But if you want to grow and be competitive, this is what you need. For banks as well, everybody, all consumer companies and so on.
Do you see, Michael, that that companies like Vodafone, Safaricom, or Kenya Airways, others actually will be part of the data industry, the way Amazon moved to Amazon Web Service, or even MasterCard? If 40% of MasterCard's revenue is what's called from data and services or value-added services. So companies switch over also.
I don't see that. I mean, Safaricom, it's got its own data centers and things like that, but I don't see that going to be their business. Their business is to the consumer, same as Kenya Airways. Yes, we don't need to selling data as a service at this point. Our business is if you start to do that, I think then you start to lose your plot. So I don't see us going down the Amazon way, AWS or anything like that, as Safaricom or Kenya Airways. But it may be in the future. But I think using these ability to use this data is going to be the important thing, in my view.
Yeah. Which soccer club do you think, football club, I follow?
No, I don't know. But if I had your mobile phone, I would tell you.
That's so difficult because in my city is only one big club.
But there was an experiment that we did. There was an experiment we did in Italy 1 year with big data. We could predict with 95% accuracy what football clubs Italians watched just by looking at their behavior, their social behavior, without knowing who they are.
Super cool. Michael, to come to the last portion, you already spoke about the future of the industry and of data. Maybe let's start with Africa. There's been obviously, I guess the continent, moves along. Some countries faster than others. Some still countries disappoint. I think, including your home country, South Africa, where I also worked on a little bit. But at the same time, there's been leapfrogging. So how do you see data change lives in Africa over the next 10 years, and what will be the key decision points?
Look, I think, we've gone through a few industrial revolutions in Africa, maybe 100 years behind Europe to some extent. The big latest industrial revolution, well, the second latest was with the introduction of low-cost mobile phones or mobile usage. Then came, financial inclusion. I think the next 10 years is going to see this continuous explosion of using, the mobile phone, which is the only thing you have. Because remember, we don't have fixed line services across the country. We don't have trains across the country, big highways across the country. But the mobile phone the smartphone in your hand is going to become, a much more important going forward across Africa. And I think this is going to be where people are going to focus on. Right now, if you look at the amount of data that we use, financial inclusion, all these sort of things, I think this is going to continue to get better and bigger. And I think with more quality. Right now we're still individual countries in Africa. We are, small countries, big countries, but all we are very individual, and we still have these boundary issues. But I think over the next 5-10 years, this is going to disappear a lot. I think, in my view.
Now, before we close, we should talk briefly about AI, because obviously Safaricom and you demonstrated that Africa can innovate, not just replicate or adopt. Now, it will be big improvement, right? If countries just adopt what's out there, from driverless cars to telemedicine. But then some argue just that while Africa or Kenya has talent, just the base infrastructure would need to be so fundamentally different to really drive the AI revolution. What's your view on that?
I think people always underestimate Africa. And I don't think you should underestimate Africa. I think where you're going to see AI taking a big role is in services. I don't see driverless cars, these kind of things being the big deal thing. This is going to be in services, in education, in health. I think this is where AI is going to play a much bigger role than where it is today. We've tried telemedicine. We've been banging on telemedicine 5 years now, but we haven't made a breakthrough yet. We're not doing it right. I think this is where it's going to come. I don't see it. I think this is where AI is going to play a big role. Is in services, in health, education, remote education. Right now, we have a lot of universities, but actually the product is not good. I think this is where you can see AI playing a much more important role in going forward in Africa. Never underestimate Africa. Never underestimate Africa.
That's a very nice theme of this talk. Never underestimate Africa. We always have a very final question to every guest on the show, Michael. But what's up for you next? What are your plans? I know you're involved in a number of ventures. What are you up to?
Things are coming out. I stepped down from the KQ board in July this year. I stepped down from the Safaricom boards also in July this year. So I think new things are coming on the horizon. I'm never going to sit still. My big, if I had a wish list of where do I want to go, other than things that I'm looking at more, is in improving agriculture. I think agriculture, and that's another thing where AI can play a real role, is how can we improve the productivity of African farmers, not international farmers who grow on a mass scale, but African farmers. How can we improve that productivity? That's what I think I'm probably going to focus my attention going forward.
Well, impressive, Michael. The final question is, and I'm not sure if you're prepared for that, but it doesn't matter because you're very quick on your feet. What is your favorite number, Michael? And tell us the story around that number.
No favorite number. I couldn't even think of a favorite number. Even if you asked me to give it some thought, I would not say. I don't know. I have no favorite number. No.
No favorite.
So I
No,
presume if it would be a number, it would be a single-digit number, but I have no idea what that would be.
legit, yeah. We had somebody talk infinity. Somebody else was number 8. Obviously, Homie had number 17, but that's fine.
No,
Obviously,
I don't think I would have something like that. What's yours?
mine is probably somehow it's actually 32, but that was more just was a certain stage of my age which was fantastic, which is fine now. So yeah, mine is 32.